between Russiagate, between BLM summer from COVID, which was, in fact, a cover-up by the WHO, to, of course, the cover-up of Joe Biden's health. I mean, the number of massive, serious cover-ups and manipulations, it is fully justified, and not only justified, necessary for people like Gabbard to expose all of this. The most shocking part of what Gabbard released yesterday, it's a House Intelligence Committee report, and the most shocking part of it that she discusses is that the Russians clearly had negative information on Hillary Clinton they did not drop during the 2016 election cycle, which undermines the claim, pretty obviously, that they wanted Trump to win. If they wanted Trump to win, then in the last days of the election, when Trump was narrowing the gap, they really should have dropped all of the dirt they supposedly had.
The report goes into great detail about the information that Russia and Putin had on Hillary Clinton, which included possible criminal acts like secret meetings with multiple named U.S. religious organizations in which State Department officials offered, in exchange for supporting Secretary Clinton's campaign for the presidency, significant increases in financing from the State Department. They also had documents that showed the patronage of the State Department to State Department employees who would go and support Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. There were high-level DNC emails that detailed evidence of Hillary's, quote, psycho-emotional problems, uncontrolled fits of anger, aggression, and cheerfulness, and that then Secretary Clinton was allegedly on a daily regimen of heavy tranquilizers.
Okay, so she's putting all of that out there. Democrats, of course, are very annoyed with all of this because they say, okay, well, that's Russian information supposedly about what Hillary Clinton's health condition was, but we don't have that confirmed. And so now you're doing rumor and innuendo by putting out a bunch of stuff that wasn't actually confirmed by the intelligence community and all of the rest. So let's go through what's actually here, what the timeline was, because you can see, again, it is absolutely true that the Obama administration, from the middle of the summer and on in 2016, tried to create a massive narrative surrounding President Trump, and then after he won, his incoming administration suggesting that they were tools of the Russians. Kimberly Strassel over at the Wall Street Journal lays out the actual timeline here, which is pretty telling. She says, according to a new report released by the DNI, career security analysts in a September 2016 intelligence community assessment did not believe Russia had the capabilities to successfully execute widespread attacks on election infrastructure and judged it more interested in making the U.S. electoral process appear illegitimate, which is pretty much what it did. By December 8th, 2016, the intel community had compiled a 7-page President's Daily Brief draft on what cyber activities it had found during the election. That presidential daily brief cited the intelligence community's low to moderate confidence assessment that Russia was involved in the compromise of an inadequately protected Illinois voter registration database. It also cited high-profile Russian cyber-enabled data leaks during the election that probably were intended to cause psychological effects like undermining the credibility of the election process and candidates. That draft was supposed to be published the very next day. Hours after that presidential daily brief was circulated, the FBI, led by James Comey, sent Kurt word it would be drafting a dissent and asking it be removed from the list of authors. A DHS official asked exactly what was going on. Later, the DNI killed the publication of the PBD based on some new guidance. We now know from former special counsel John Durham that this time period coincided with Comey seizing on the infamous Steele dossier. The next day, December 9th, and this is the key date, the Obama White House gathered together its national security principals to talk about a sensitive topic, including former DNI James Clapper, former CIA Director John Brennan, FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, Attorney General Loretta Lynch, and others. After the meeting, Clapper's assistant sent out an email titled POTUS Tasking on Russian Election Meddling, asking DNI officials to create an assessment per the president's request. Now, again, that is unusual. Usually, the way you do intelligence assessments, as Strassel points out, is you look at the available intelligence, and then the intelligence community filters it, double checks it, and then they create an assessment. You don't have the president saying, I want you to reassess the information that you've already put into this intelligence assessment. So that is unusual. From there, says Strassel, it was a straight shot to the new and inflammatory January 6th intelligence community assessment. The new ICA baldly blared, quote, we assess Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered an influence campaign in 2016 aimed at the U.S. presidential election. Russia's goals were to undermine public faith in the U.S. democratic process, denigrate Secretary Clinton, and harm her electability and potential presidency. We further assess Putin and the Russian government developed a clear preference for President-elect Trump. We have high confidence in these judgments. And is that contention specifically that the House Intelligence Report that Gabbard released goes after? So again, when I say there's an oversell happening, the oversell is that there is no Russian election meddling. There clearly was Russian interference in the election. The question is why they did it. So the ICA that assessment from January 6th suggested that they did it to help Trump and to hurt Clinton. And that, of course, was the line retailed for the next several years and even up till today by Democrats and their friends. That probably is not true, according to this House intelligence report. In fact, there is good information that not only is it not true, that essentially the Obama administration went back and doctored the intelligence in order to achieve that effect. Okay, so now we get into the House intelligence report. And again, we've laid out the timeline. The timeline was that essentially there was not intel strong enough to really suggest that the Russians preferred Trump to Clinton, and that's why they were doing what they were doing, as opposed to just screwing around with our elections, which is something they've been doing for literally longer than I have been alive. It's something that the Russian government has been doing since the days of the Soviet Union. So those House oversight files were released yesterday. And here is what the House oversight files say. Quote, most ICA judgments on Russia activities in the U.S. election employed proper and analytic tradecraft and were consistent with observed Russian behavior. Okay, so right off the bat, that House intelligence report that was released, again, by Tulsi Gabbard yesterday, says that the vast majority of what was in that ICA was not in fact false, was not in fact doctored. There were certain specific sections that were seriously problematic, and those are the things that we're going to get into. The key judgments found to be credible include President Putin ordered conventional and cyber influence operations, notably by leaking politically sensitive emails obtained from computer intrusions too. Putin's principal motivations in these operations were to undermine faith in the U.S. democratic process and to weaken what the Russians considered to be an inevitable Clinton presidency. Okay, so this is different from the Senate intelligence report. So there's a Senate intelligence report that came out about the same time as this House report. The House report was classified. The Senate report was not, so we knew about it at the time. That Senate report suggested that Putin interfered in order to help Hillary Clinton. The House report says, actually, the information suggests that Obama and team doctored that up and gussied it up in order to come to the conclusion that Putin was trying to help Trump as opposed to screwing around with our election process to undermine faith in American elections. That House report says Putin held back leaking some compromising material for post-election use against the expected Clinton administration. And again, this is what the House intelligence report focuses specifically on. So, can the charge that the Obama team basically exaggerated and doctored the claim that Vladimir Putin wanted Trump to win, can that sustain the burden of, say, a treason charge? Now, again, we'll get to the legal specifics in a bit. Treason's an actual criminal statutory charge. Very difficult to make the claim that Barack Obama, in dealing with the intelligence community, is not protected by executive immunity. That case, Trump versus the United States, likely puts Obama's actions in the category of at least presumptive immunity and maybe total immunity because the executive has tremendous power over the sorts of people who he runs. But according to this report, in contrast to the rest of the ICA, the judgment that Putin developed a clear preference for candidate Trump and aspired to help his chances of victory did not adhere to the tenets of analytic standards. The director of CIA ordered the post-election publication of 15 reports containing previously collected but unpublished intelligence, 3 of which were substandard, containing information that was unclear, of uncertain origin, potentially biased, or implausible, and those became foundational sources for the ICA judgments that Putin preferred Trump over Clinton. The ICA then misrepresented these reports as reliable without mentioning their significant underlying flaws. One scant, unclear, and unverifiable fragment of a sentence from one of the substandard reports constitutes the only classified information cited to suggest that Putin, quote, aspired to help Trump win. And, says the House committee, the ICA ignored or selectively quoted reliable intelligence reports that challenged and in some cases undermined judgments that Putin sought to elect Trump. So what did the ICA actually said? They said, quote, we further assess Putin and the Russian government developed a clear preference for Trump. We have high confidence in these judgments. It also said CIA and FBI assess with high confidence Putin and the Russian government aspire to help Trump's chances of victories when possible by discrediting Secretary Clinton. Now, again, that is the controversial part of the ICA that Gabbard is citing right here. And as the House report says, unlike routine IC analysis, the ICA was a high-profile product ordered by the president, directed by senior agency heads, and created by just 5 CIA analysts using one principal drafter. Production of that ICA was subject to unusual directives from the president and senior political appointees, in particular, DCIA. The draft was not properly coordinated within the CIA or the IC. The ICA did not cite any report where Putin directly indicated helping Trump win was the objective. That judgment rested on a questionable interpretation of this one unclear fragment of a sentence. The unclear fragment is part of a sentence that reads, quote, Putin had made this decision to leak DNC emails after he had come to believe the Democratic nominee had better odds of winning the U.S. presidential election and that candidate Trump whose victory Putin was counting on most likely would not be able to pull off a convincing victory. So a senior CIA operations official said, we don't know exactly what is meant by that. 5 different people read it 5 different ways. Now, again, that is literally the only material that was used by the ICA to determine that Putin wanted Trump to win. But when it says whose victory Putin was counting on could mean expected, desired, hoping for. That could mean a lot of things. CIA officers in the component running Russia operations described, according to the report, how 2 versions of the report, one without the fragment and one with, were published as the ICA was being written. The ICA bullet text is alarming, implying the existence of a Russian plan for engagement with the Trump campaign that most readers would see as strong evidence of Putin showing a clear preference for candidate Trump. But the ICA omits critical report context, which, had it been made available to the reader, would show the report to be implausible, if not ridiculous. And again, so some of those big indicators that this was not true is that Putin made no positive mention of Trump. He actually was skeptical of both Trump and Clinton that they could improve strained relationships. The ICA judged that Putin wanted to help Trump's chances of victory when possible by discrediting Secretary Clinton. But when the race evolved to the point that it became possible for Putin to help Trump win, the polls narrowed dramatically as Election Day approached. The ICA did not address why Putin didn't drop all that information that we quoted Gabbard before saying, all about Hillary Clinton's health and all of the rest. We'll get to more on this in just a moment. First, here's something fascinating. Until the 1990s, the U.S. government classified encryption as munitions. They literally categorized it alongside weapons. And you know what? They weren't totally wrong. Encryption is very, very powerful. It's your shield against those who want to exploit your personal information online. That's why we use ExpressVPN. It's an elegant solution that encrypts your internet connection and routes it through secure servers, keeping your online activity private the way it should be. I've been using ExpressVPN for years. Obviously, I'm abroad a lot. I'm going away from home all the time. And when that happens, well, I have to use ExpressVPN because otherwise I'm leaving my data out there for anybody to grab. Think about it. Without encryption, your digital life is an open book. Your ISP can legally sell your browsing history. Data brokers track your every move across websites. Government agencies can peek into your online world. Here's the best part. ExpressVPN, it makes privacy simple. One tap, when the app turns green, you're now protected. It works on all your devices, and your subscription covers up to 8 of them. Find out how you can get 4 months free by scanning the QR code on screen, clicking that link in the description box below, or by heading on over to expressvpn.com/Ben Shapiro Show. Now, this is the part that, of course, is getting all the headlines, is the fact that there was a bunch of material in the FBI's possession that showed that the Russians had what they thought was information about Secretary Clinton's health and all of the rest, suggesting that she had, quote, intensified psycho-emotional problems, including uncontrolled fits of anger, aggression, and cheerfulness, that she was placed on a daily regimen of heavy tranquilizers, and while afraid of losing, she remained, quote, obsessed with a thirst for power. Or that the SVR, that is Russian intelligence, had information that Clinton suffered from type 2 diabetes, ischemic heart disease, deep vein thrombosis, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So why didn't they release that is sort of the question. Right? Why didn't they release all of that in order to hurt Clinton if they wanted to hurt her in the last days of the election? That is the case that is being made by Gabbard and also by this House Intel report. By devoting nearly 2 pages of ICA text, says the report, to summarizing the Steele dossier in a high-profile assessment intended for the president and president-elect, the ICA misrepresented both the significance and credibility of the dossier reports. The ICA referred to the dossier as Russian plans and intentions, falsely implying to high-level U.S. policymakers the dossier had intelligence value for understanding Moscow's influence operations. So again, this is to support the idea that the ICA was designed in order to put a bunch of bad stuff about Trump out there into the public view. The ICA used the Steele dossier, is what the House committee concluded. The ICA lent an inaccurate sense of credibility to the dossier by describing it using intelligence terminology without addressing all of the serious intelligence tradecraft red flags that characterized the dossier. So, concluded the House, quote, President Putin's priorities were not focused on election operations designed to help candidate Trump win. Rather, his priorities appeared focused on post-election operations to undermine the credibility of the expected and possibly preferred Clinton administration, and on calling into question the fairness and effectiveness of the American democratic process. So who's to blame for this? According to the report, by finishing the ICA before the new president was inaugurated, the outgoing, that'd be John Brennan, retained total control over who could see the raw intelligence cited, who was allowed to review the draft, and what comments would be accepted or rejected. Senior experienced CIA officers who objected that the intelligence did not support the key judgments that Putin, quote, aspired to help Trump win, were silenced by Brennan in December 2016. Those officers might have had their voices heard if the ICA's publication delayed until after the inauguration to allow the incoming CIA director to manage the process. Okay, so again, many things could be true. Those are the key findings of that House report that was released by Tulsi Gabbard. Essentially, that there's very little question, according to that report, that the ICA that was done at the behest of Barack Obama directly, based on that December 9th meeting, that it was biased in favor of the proposition that Donald Trump had been boosted on purpose by Vladimir Putin, which ended up being sort of the key load-bearing foundation of the Mueller investigation. Now, here's the problem. We already know a lot of that stuff. There's nothing super duper new about all of that. This is the point that's being made by the editorial board at National Review. Quote, following Trump's stunning victory, Obama directed his intelligence officials to hurriedly compose and publish an intelligence community assessment to highlight Russian interference in the election. Obama and VP Biden met with top national security officials on January 5th, 2017, the day before they briefed the incoming Trump. That meeting covered Russian interference in the election, contacts between Trump transition official Michael Flynn and Russia's ambassador to the U.S., and the Obama administration's withholding from the Trump transition team of intelligence about Russia. In the last minutes of the Obama administration, then National Security Advisor Susan Rice wrote a memo to file discussing that January 5th White House meeting led by Obama. The memo minimized Obama's role and shifted primary responsibility for the probe to FBI Director James Comey. But here's the point National Review is making. All of the above has been well known for 8 years. Even though Gabbard presents it as a shocking revelation, there's nothing new about Obama's connection to the Trump-Russia collusion farce. Okay, so what exactly is new here? Well, again, the answer here is not particularly a lot. Special Counsel John Durham, who was tapped by the Trump first DOJ, that's the first administration, to investigate the origins of the Trump-Russia collusion narrative, spent 4 exhaustive years on the probe. As his 306-page report concludes, the Clinton campaign was principally responsible for fabricating the story. The FBI was recklessly irresponsible in opening a full investigation, using the dossier in court without rudimentary verification steps. This is still true. Okay, so the question is whether there is anything that's sort of new here. And Eli Lake, who, of course, was very early on Russiagate, like from the very beginning, covering this, and now writes for the Free Press. He said, one area where Gabbard does bring new information to light is the revelation of a whistleblower inside the intelligence community who did not believe the intelligence supported the conclusion in that ICA that the Russian government developed a clear preference for President-elect Trump. But that is not even the first time that issue has been raised, according to Lake. The 2018 report from Republicans on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence also found the intelligence did not support that assertion. All these are important points for the historical record. They hardly amount to the treasonous conspiracy Gabbard is accusing Trump's political opposition of fomenting. Okay, so again, 2 separate questions. Did Obama do something wrong? Absolutely yes. Was it horrifying? Absolutely yes. Was the Obama administration attempting to undermine the incoming Trump administration? Absolutely yes. Is there a lot of new stuff? There's some. Is it enough to justify the kind of charges that the Gabbard is now saying that her own government should make? Is she putting Pam Bondi in a bad position, the AG, by suggesting openly the prosecutions are coming? This is the problem with overselling. This is the problem with overselling. All of this should see the light of day, of course. And much of it was already known. Russiagate is one of the worst scandals in American history. It really is. Because having an administration and a deep state dedicated to undermining the president of the United States for 4 years is insane. And of course, we've seen many of these sorts of scandals, unfortunately, over the course of the last 10 years. It's why institutional trust does not exist anymore between Russiagate, between BLM Summer, when we were led to believe that there was a vast attack on Black Americans of all stripes by law enforcement, culminating in a massive Ferguson effect, where law enforcement should stop doing its job, from COVID, which was, in fact, a cover-up by the WHO, the origins of COVID, a cover-up involving Anthony Fauci, to, of course, the cover-up of Joe Biden's health. I mean, the number of massive, serious cover-ups and manipulations taken by people at the top levels of American government are insane. So, of course, it is fully justified, and not only justified, necessary for people like Gabbard to expose all of this. The problem comes when you oversell, because once you oversell, you end up putting your own administration in a bad position because people want actual prosecutions. People want an outcome from all of this. Well, that's all for now, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts down below. Be sure to check out all of the other great content on my channel. I'll see you here next time.